Hello, 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 check. Hello, check. Hello, hello, check. Hello, check.
So this session will be start soon. So another couple of minutes. So we are waiting, like the people who are outside will return back. Okay. So welcome to this session, interactive forum on AI in education and industry. So this session will be chaired by Professor Venu Govindaraju. So he is working as a Vice President for Research and Economic Development at the University of Buffalo, State University of New York, and his expertise lies in the artificial intelligence, and his seminal work in handwriting recognition was at the core of the first handwritten address interpretation system used by the US Postal Services. And he has led sponsored projects funded by federal agencies and high-tech companies, totaling about $1,000 million during his career. And he is PI on the $20 million federally funded National AI Institute for Exceptional Education at University of Buffalo. And he holds 6 patents and has received several major professional awards, and he has co-authored over 400 scientific papers. With these introductions, I am requesting Professor Venu Govindaraju to start this session. Thank you.
All right, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this session on artificial intelligence. I'm sure in the last couple of years, no matter which conference you have attended, you would be hard pressed to find a session where artificial intelligence was not mentioned. Perhaps ChatGPT is mentioned in every session. So today's, we have structured this particular session in two parts. The first part, we're going to have 4 presentations at the podium. First, we will have a university's administrator's viewpoint on how research in education is going to be advanced in this era of artificial intelligence. And that will be done by Provost Scott Weber. That will be followed by Dean C.V. Jawahar from IIIT Hyderabad, who is a distinguished scholar in computer vision and artificial intelligence. That then again will be followed by Professor Shiva Rudra Raju from University of Wisconsin, Madison, and who is also associated with a startup company here in India. So that will be interesting because Jawahar will bring you the computer science viewpoint of artificial intelligence, more foundational, and Shiva is going to talk about the application of artificial intelligence in materials, very relevant to this conference. And then my presentation will be more on AI for public good. So once the 4 presentations are done, we will shift gears for the second part, where we're going to have a fireside chat. I will have my distinguished colleagues over here on the panel, and I will moderate that session, and hopefully it will be an interactive session. So that said, let me introduce my first speaker here, Provost Scott Weber, who is the Chief Academic Officer at University at Buffalo, providing leadership across the academic enterprise, including research, scholarship, and creative activities, undergraduate, graduate, professional, and international education, faculty development, diversity and inclusion initiatives, and university libraries. Provost Weber is leading the implementation of UB's vision to be recognized among the nation's top 25 public research universities focused on building on UB's strengths to achieve new levels of excellence in research, scholarship, education, and engagement. A member of UB's faculty since 1983, Weber is an innovative scholar and teacher and former chair of UB's Department of Civil Structural and Environmental Engineering. So please join me in welcoming Provost Weber to make a presentation.
Well, first of all, thank you, everyone, and thank you for being here, especially our students. I really appreciate the dedication that you've shown to participate in this event, and I hope you'll learn something from the panel. I'm probably the only one up here, and maybe even in the audience, that probably knows, I probably know the least about AI, but that's not my role at the university. My role at the university, as Vanu shared with you, is to serve as provost, and in that, I think of my job as trying to help our faculty and our students achieve their goals. And how do we provide the talent, the support, the infrastructure to do that? So what I want to really try to talk about in my time today is how and why university administrators, or just universities, are trying to advocate and push adoption of AI, especially in research and teaching. And I would say at Buffalo, this is a top priority for ours. So I wanted to start maybe with the imperative first, and let me start with this slide. Maybe some of the times are a little off, but I think you'll get the basic drift of this. So if you look at transformative technologies over the years, from the telephone, television, internet, we started out with a transition time of decades, sometimes multiple decades, and when we got to the internet, you could talk about still a few decades from its earliest forms to when it was popularly adopted. And then we get to the smartphone, and that occurred very, very rapidly. And then now we're at ChatGPT, and you know what happened in there. It just exploded. As Professor Govindraju just said, there's not a conference you don't hear sort of ChatGPT, generative AI, or whatnot mentioned. And that speed actually matters to us. Another way to look at this, perhaps, is the time to reach 100 million users. So we come down here with the World Wide Web, launched around 1991, maybe 7 years, maybe 6, 8. I'm not going to quibble one way or the other to get to 100 million users. And then you see what happens with Uber and Facebook. Then you've got Instagram, which halves it again. And pretty soon your TikTok, it's less than a year, and ChatGPT basically was 2 months. It just felt like you had to know what was going on in this environment. So that's sort of the environment we're working in. It feels like you have to know, as faculty and students, you don't have to like it, you don't have to want to adopt it, but you have to kind of understand, and as a university person, I have to understand how I can help my faculty and students be in this environment. Another thing to look at is where our students go is they go to employers, and our employers have expectations of us as well. So if you look here, I won't read all of these aspects here, but 2/3 roughly are estimated to already have some form of AI embedded in them, even if we don't know that we're using it. About 50% of the current employment, again, maybe you can quibble, but I think it's clear that there are some jobs that are accelerating out of the marketplace. And there are other jobs that are coming on to this process. But 75% of companies plan to adopt AI or AI-adopted technologies over the next 3 to 4 years. If you look at the increase of jobs mentioning ChatGPT, you can see it exploded. Of course, that makes sense. It was this very small denominator, so it's probably not unreasonable that would grow so rapidly. And then what you see is the #1 fastest growing job category, AI and machine learning specialists. By the way, I might add, with high salaries. So how do I think about that from the perspective of the university? Well, I think the speed of technology adoption is so fast that faculty, students, and staff, we have got to be conversant and knowledgeable in this domain. Employers are expecting graduates to be AI proficient, even if it's ill-defined at this moment. Funding agencies are heavily focused on AI. All of you, I think, in this room have probably seen advertisements for funding. They're general, and then you look at what's funded, and most of it's AI. It's just the environment we're in. Research that we do in the universities is focused heavily around the social good, and I think AI, and I believe it, or I wouldn't be up here today, is a differentiator for universities. And like I said, at the University of Buffalo, this is an imperative for us. And so what I want to do today is talk a little bit about how we got there, what we're doing, some of the supports that we provided for those who want to use them. And then when we have time, I think you'll have some questions about that. So let's start with AI research at the University of Buffalo first. Now, we have a long history of this, and my good colleague who's right here and has been a great colleague of mine for many, many years, was instrumental in the sort of mid-90s of really looking at document recognition excellence. And in that work was probably some of the earliest success in AI and machine learning. Just remember, this is already in the 1990s. I'm sure some of you weren't even born then. And basically what that did was it transformed the way postal services received mail, looked at handwriting that we all used at that time to write addresses, processed that, sorted it, and sped the delivery at a significant savings, both in the US and other countries across the globe. This was really the beginning of a lot of work at our university that really led to our current direction and really set the tone. Over the years since then, we've had multiple ways that we have fostered computational research, data science research, any number of things in this area. And we've had them sort of spattered around the university. And back in 2021, what we did was we decided to bring all these together. So we brought all the institutes, all the centers of excellence, everything together into one major center. And we call that the Institute for AI and Data Science, IAD. And we consolidated, as I said, very much of what was going on in the university. It brings together researchers, labs, institutes, and centers of excellence across UB for the advancement of AI. And its sort of mission is supported by the university. I support that through the Office of the Provost. I think it's really the university to provide infrastructure. Now that's both people and hardware, and opportunities which build relationships, support creative interaction, and support visionary ideas that are required to address pressing societal problems. So that's the framework. We also happen to be in good fortune because New York State in the US is a progressive state, and our governor had a vision of how New York State could lead in the AI space. And about a year ago, close enough, she came out in an address and said that we were going to form a consortium in New York State. And New York State, for those who don't know, is called the Empire State Building, things like that. And we would call it the Empire AI Consortium. It was a consortium of private and public universities, some foundations, and we would spend $400 million to build probably the best academic AI data center in the country, in the United States. And we were fortunate because of our history and success in AI to have that located on the UB campus. The first phase of that is already ongoing. We call it Alpha, very imaginative here. Now Beta's coming on, and pretty soon the full will come on board. It's, again, you can see the universities are involved in things, but it's really transformative, and I think it will transform the way our faculties, and it will give them a resource that not many faculty will have across the country. We have over 200 faculty at the University of Buffalo engaged, and it's probably grown since we've used that number, that are involved in AI research. And they cover we have 12 schools. We cover everything from medicine, humanities, law, across the board, engineering, sciences. We cut arts. It doesn't matter. If it's there, we cut other than ag. We don't have ag. And we have a number of faculty. And what I want to do sort of in the next few minutes is just highlight some of the projects that they've been working on that I think you'll find interesting, because it'll give you a flavor of the breadth of activities that are across the campus that we're working on. But before I do that, let me just talk a little bit about some of the success we've had more recently. I talked about that early document excellence work, and let me talk about some of the research that we've done. And one of the first ones I want to talk about is an NSF Center for Exceptional Education. This is the AI Center, probably the premier award in AI in the United States, and there are many of them around. We're not the only university by any means that has one, but I think if you really want to be in this game, you have to be in this space. I'll talk a little bit more about that, but that's a $20 million award over 5 years. We have another one, we've really focused on education a lot, and this is from the Department of Education that looks at early childhood literacy. And then we have some other very important ones that you see on the screen that are several faculty. The first two are very large consortiums. The others are, as you can see by the size, are very, very important, but led by smaller groups with a little bit more focus. Maybe I'll just let me mention the last one. In the United States, you've heard of the CHIPS Act and the engine. This is a very large funding opportunities, and where we're focused at the University of Buffalo is sort of in our historical context of looking at health and health disparities facilitated by AI. So let's talk just, I'm going to give you a few challenges and then how we've been addressing them, and I'll move on pretty quickly from this. So if you look at the humanities, one of their biggest challenges is over the years, there have been many, many notebooks written, documents, scripted, anecdoted, pages, annotated and whatnot. And all this information is kind of buried in libraries. It's not accessible to the public. It's not analyzed very easily in that manner. And so we've been working, our AI scientists and our humanities faculty have been working together, and a really terrific one is Christine Miller. And she's developed the Marianne Moore Digital Archive, which actually digitizes her whole body of work in multi-language areas where anybody in the world can access that and do research in that area. So just one example. Another example is the health challenge. In the US, wounds. Wounds are really problematic in medicine. And in fact, many of the people who are suffering through that healing process don't have easy access to physical, physician care. They're in rural areas. They're economically disadvantaged and whatnot. And so one of our research teams is actually looking at wound repair and healing using smartphone images of those wounds that are then through telemedicine. Another example is brain aneurysm. The University of Buffalo's Department of Neurosurgery is world-class. It's been a leader, especially in brain aneurysms and surgery to repair those. They developed some of the earliest, well, I wouldn't say earliest, but most advanced techniques. And now what they're doing is they're using AI during surgery. So while surgery is going on, they're using AI to help the physician. And for those of you who work with physicians, and I have a good colleague here, they don't always want your help, especially on the surgical table. But what's really amazing is this work is actually transforming the way they are progressing in their surgery, and it's showing great health results. So that was this slide. I apologize for jumping ahead a little bit. AI and information integrity. Who hasn't been involved in this? And who's our most vulnerable population? The elderly. I don't know about you, even I find myself questioning whether something I've gotten recently is legitimate. It's so good now. They're using AI against us because they can look at all the relationships we have, the reporting relationships. And so I got something from a dean the other day that was asking me a question. I wasn't really sure if it was a real message. So I had to call them and say, hey, did you really send me this message? But the elderly are particularly vulnerable in this space. And it awfully costs, some elderly lose their life savings in this process. So we have researchers who are doing amazing work in not only detecting fake messages and things like that, but also educating the elderly and having gamification of that process where they can learn how to detect this. And then finally, not only have they done that, but they've developed a deep fake-o-meter. That's a real name. And it's free, open platform, and as you can see, a number of news media, consultants are using that, and the use continues to grow to help decipher, to help identify those areas where obviously information integrity is lacking. Let me now just talk a little bit about the AI National Center for Exceptional Education that I said, and I didn't say it, but it is actually being led again by my colleague. This is a program that tries to identify, let me back up for a second. Speech processing disorders everywhere are a major problem for children and their ability to learn. My son suffered from this. And if you don't catch them from ages 3 to 8, somewhere in that range, they can last for a long time. And the classic model is you go into the classroom, if you're lucky, your child is identified, and they go off and they go into another room while all the rest of the class is still in the class. So they're missing out. While they are getting help, they're missing out. What this proposal does is it embeds AI directly in the primary classroom. It detects opportunities for enhancement and offers remedial or therapy for these children so they never have to leave the classroom. This is a multi-university center across the United States. It's housed and centered at the University of Buffalo, but you can see all the other AI centers here and ours, and it's really, I think, been transformative, and it's one that NSF often points to as an exemplar of how AI can be used for the social good. So let me then close a little bit with about, that's research, and we're doing a lot to support that. As I talked about, really the primary mechanism is IAD, the Institute for Artificial Intelligence and Data Science, and how we do that with both personnel and infrastructure. But we're doing something similar on the pedagogical side and teaching. So what we all do in universities, if you don't do it here, I'm sure you do, but we develop a task force. We brought faculty with very differing views together, and they spent about 6 months, because they don't have a lot of time, and really develop recommendations for the university. And the quote I really liked about this is, I think it captures what we are as faculty and how we have differing views. It says the use of generative AI cannot be ignored. Whatever one's individual opinion on the potential benefits and risk of generative AI, it is being integrated into all the digital platforms our students will confront in their daily lives, both as students and citizens of the world. And that's sort of what I was trying to share with you earlier about the imperative. The way we're approaching this is 4 pillars. Integrate it into our classroom teaching, our clinical teaching, our laboratory teaching, develop policies, curriculum, assessment, provide guidance to our faculty and our students, because what most people are thinking about right away is academic integrity. And then how do we communicate what we're learning and our best policies? So we've done a survey. About 25% of our faculty at the University of Buffalo use AI in their teaching across the different platforms that I just talked about. About 80% of those allow their students to use AI as part of their assignments. The other 75% are interested, but obviously not yet. And so obviously that first 25% are the leading edge, which is true on almost any technology. But 65% of that 75% saying they're kind of interested and like to learn more. Now, I hope they'll find a little humor in this, but here are some faculty perspectives. Overall, AI has provided me with significant enhancements, and I won't read the rest of it. I believe blah, 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 okay? Tools like Grammarly and ChatGPT, they're really important. So that's the people that are interested, they're adopting. Let's go to the other side, which is a big fraction of our faculty. AI is an existential threat to education. Not because it produces better content, but because it's because it's so cheap. There's no need to hire a journalist or a lawyer or a historian as long as the written product of AI is good enough, and they put quotes, good enough. Obviously, that didn't mean it was good enough to them. Writers will go the way of buggy whip makers. And then others just say, no, I don't feel comfortable. So what have we done? So what we've done is like what a lot of places do, and I'm sure others that are here have done this very similar things in your university. We have developed a seed grant program where we invite faculty who have the best ideas to come in, and we give them funding so they can try these tools and this approach in their teaching, and then we have them come back and we share that. And it's been incredibly successful, and it's all across the university. It's in music, it's in political science, it's in engineering, it's in chemistry, it's really across the domain. I'm telling you, if you got a chance to hear from those faculty, you would be incredibly inspired by what they're doing and how they're doing. So with that, let me share just 2 examples on that. In the School of Dental Medicine, and I'm just using this sort of as, again, the same format. It's Harvard School of Public Health. Suggested using AI to make diagnoses may reduce treatment costs by up to 50% and improve health outcomes by 40%. I don't know if that's true or not. That's what they're suggesting. What we're doing is we're embedding it in the education of our dental students, in the clinics, and it's actually really helping them see how they can make the best health outcomes in that process. And then in the School of Business, we know that AI is not a replacement for human intelligence. No one's making that claim. It is a tool, but potentially a very good tool. But what it can do and what it's adept at is processing and analyzing very large amounts of information, troves of data much faster than the human brain. And so this faculty is working with business, both that existing and future business leaders, really to help them understand how to build and use generative AI platforms to advance their respective organizations with particular emphasis on things you would expect: ethical usage, legal requirements, cybersecurity concerns, and managerial pitfalls. So this is all very exciting. Again, from my perspective, higher education must take a leading role in the development of AI and accelerating and transformative technology. I don't think we really have a chance in that process. Our faculty need support, our students need support, and both the research and teaching side and universities, I think, who want to be at the leading edge are providing that support in a variety of ways. And I think with support, leadership in this area is possible, and I think it can also be a differentiator in the area of higher education. So with that, thank you very much.
Okay, we'll keep the questions for the fireside chat. So let's move to our next speaker. I would like to invite Professor C.V. Jawahar.
So, so before that, I would like to request you to felicitate Professor Weber, Scott Weber. Huh? At the okay, that's it.
Um, So Professor Jawahar is the Dean of Research and Development and Head of the Center for Visual Information Technology at the International Institute of Information Technology, Hyderabad, India. At IIIT Hyderabad, he leads the research group focusing on computer vision, machine learning, and multimedia systems. He is also interested in large-scale multimedia systems with a special focus on assistive technology solutions. Professor Jawahar is an elected fellow of the Indian National Academy of Engineers and the International Association of Pattern Recognition. His prolific research is globally recognized in AI and computer vision research community with more than 200 publications in the top tier conferences and journals. Professor Jawahar.
This one.
All my
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me to be here. So when I was invited, I thought this is a quite odd invitation to be here. I'm fish out of water. Now, 2024 has been a very, very, very important year for the AI researchers because 2 Nobel Prize in physics and chemistry went to the AI machine learning this year. And we never thought that this is quite far. So till now, whenever we talk about Nobel Prize, we are always saying, oh, no, there is no Nobel Prize for computer science or AI. So what we have the best is Turing Award, which AI folks have grabbed in the past. So this we see more and more convergence of this discipline with traditional science disciplines and many other humanities, whatnot. So I'll make this lecture a little bit simple to keeping the large number of students in mind here and try to say what a simplified view of what AI looks to be. So the story is very simple, which all the computational science people perfectly know. You know xi, yi, a large number of examples of xi, yi. Can we build a model which predicts y from x? Many classical techniques exist. So now let us look at what really happens. So you take a simple problem, somebody selling something and somebody buying at a price, and you have the data visible. What do? We all know how to do. This is a kindergarten maths problem. You go to the next level where a doctor gives food to a patient and measure the blood sugar level increase. How is these two different? The process is different. The second one is hard to solve. And if you want to solve this problem, the first one is a trivial solution. The model or the function class is very, very simple for us how to do. While the second one, we don't know how to do. And we still solve the problem. The doctor comfortably still solve the problem. Doctor recommends the food based on, by guessing what type of right responses may happen or will happen on the patient. So human knows how to solve the problem. We don't have a mathematical model to do it, that's all. So this is what AI tries to do. With sufficient number of examples, which people popularly call a supervised learning problem, which is the crux of the first wave of AI success that we saw. Now let me come back and see what happened here. So this is what we were trying to do in the last 15 years of long history of AI. What did really happen? We thought that we can solve this problem from examples. A simple machine learning model or a machine learning model could predict this with reasonable accuracy with sufficient amount of data. We went to deep learning, where the function class became more and more complex. Very powerful function class. We were able to solve problems which we were not able to do otherwise. With complex inputs, multiple different type of inputs, we are able to solve or make reasonable predictions or accurate predictions or useful predictions from that. People did not stop there. People went one level further, where people talk about what to do. Say, for example, you might have seen use cases while you're like we all try to use this health band, and we are all conscious about how much we walk, what do we eat, and we don't want to log. We just take a picture of the food. When you take a picture of the food, it knows what are the ingredients, what are the weights, and this and that, etc. And finally, like help in knowing how many calories go inside and what goes out and what is a residue and what you are, like I say, it is able to tell you what is really good. So we still go further. In the era of LLMs, we still go further, and we would like to have things like just observe. Can you just observe me? When I observe you, you see everything, like starting from what I eat and what I do and everything, and then tell me what I should do, what changes I should make in my lifestyle, or depending on what my goals are, what am I supposed to do? So you can see an evolution of problems and the similar solutions evolving in this space. And this is what happened in the last 15 years. As you can see, one step from the previous step is quite like an incremental extension for all of us. But the top row is quite scary. Somebody just watch what I do and tell me everything about my future. Like all the predictions about me, what I'm going to do in the future, what I'm going to live, what I'm going to like, everything is being told by AI systems, ChatGPTs. So the way to look at it from a neural network or a computational model point of view, these are models that have become systematically bigger and bigger. Solutions that can be possibly built only by big companies with huge computing infrastructure, with so many parameters, with different names, this come back. So the naming is a marketing gimmick. Like you see that new names come, new techniques come, but systematically we know how we moved from one step to the other. And all these techniques generally use a simple, computational neural model, which started by imitating the biological neurons. And today we don't know how similar or different are from the biological neurons, but we know the computational neuron model, and with sufficient amount of the data we can learn. with a nice optimization problem or a complex optimization problem to solve non-convex large optimization problem that we need to solve with a simple algorithm called the backpropagation algorithm and incremental gradient descent, nothing more fancy, and that is still the best available in the market. So with that, what do we do? With that, we solve problems, something as simple as I show here example. If I show a picture, I should be able to say what's the age of this person, and we call this problem as a regression. Or where is this person standing, some long coordinate, some number. Or I say what this person is doing, 1 out of k classes as classification. Or I could even predict a graph or a tree or a string or something on top of it. So my output could be a single number, 1 of k classes, integers, or even a graph, tree, anything, whatever you can think of. And this sort of problem or solving given xi, yi pairs to do this has become textbook material today. Plenty of open source code available. Nice way to start and playing for students. Indeed, there is an interesting dimension that slowly came into the picture, the empirical expertise required to conduct experiments and make it work, which is possibly like a not very happy or comfortable with the traditional computer science people, where they never believed that there is an empiricalness is part of the research. Now, along with that, there is another interesting wave came, where starting from a simple distribution, can you generate? The 2012 Andre Karpathy took just William Shakespeare's all the material available and gave it a recurrent neural network and told that, okay, write like a William Shakespeare. Or he took a lot of open source available algebraic geometry, LaTeX, like a source available, and he gave it to a neural network and told, now you write algebraic geometry. It worked. Fools like us who don't know William Shakespeare enough, it could fool. The phases that you see here in 2015, Ian Goodfellow, where they talked about like you can generate images directly with, these are phases of non-existent people. It is able to generate synthetic artificial faces or data. Now today, diffusion models, but in general, all of them talk about you can generate data. So now if you know the two stories now, you go back and see the two steps. Starting from the data, you are able to understand the essence of the what is present in it and make the right predictions. From the essence or a distribution, you are able to predict what you want. You can combine these two and now predict nice, interesting, multimodal things. You can move from one modality, like a face to text, image to text, speech to language, like whatever you want to do is now easy to. So you can compose this sort of neural networks to solve larger and larger problems. The discriminative techniques and the generative techniques both go hand in hand and help each other to improve continuously and provide solutions. Now, I don't know whether how this autonomous cars are impacting now autonomous laboratories. Can machines conduct all the experiments? Can machines analyze the experimental results? Can we know what experiments to conduct and find observations, build models? So at some stage, if we can connect this sort of AI system to the real world, we are closing the loop. Possibly many of the, say, tip of the iceberg here and there, we are able to see. Maybe there is a long way to go, and many of you may know what is going to happen. So in the last few years, these computational models had systematically moved from simple neural network, which we all studied at school, multi-layer perceptron, to today's transformers, which is nothing but a very fancy, large neural network or a computational model that got implemented and fundamental to the today's ChatGPT, the T in the GPT. So along with that, something else came into the interesting story. So this was a concern. So we always realized, the AI folks at least always realized this is not the way to do AI. Given large number of examples of xi, yi pairs, building the function model is not what AI should be. So the two interesting quotes We expect unsupervised learning to become more and more important in the long run. Human and animal learning is largely unsupervised. We discover the structure of the world by observing it, not by being told the name of every object. How do you learn? By just observing, not by being told. The famous quote from Jan LeCun: if the intelligence was a cake, unsupervised learning would be the cake. Supervised learning would be the icing on the cake. The reinforcement learning would be the cherry on the cake. And we know how to make the icing and cherry, but we don't know how to make the cake. And this was always bothering. How do you ever learn without being told so many times with explicit examples? At least there is a very nice thing happened in the last few years, that Jan LeCun's slides changed from 16 to 19, and it says that the pure unsupervised learning, the textbook unsupervised learning that we always thought will evolve is not the way to go. There is something called a very interesting self-supervised learning came. The data provides the supervisory signal, not humans or experts. And this worked. This strategy worked, and I'll show you an example that will give you an answer how this works. Let us look at a sentence. Marco saw a furry little wampumuk hiding in the tree. In a simple English sentence, and I ask a question, what is Marco and what is wampumuk? We all know the answer. There is no difficulty for us to understand the meaning of the first English sentence. Am I right? But surprisingly, the wampumuk is a non-existing animal. You found the meaning of a non-existing word. How? By looking at the surrounding words. The surrounding words gave us the meaning of a word. Which means you don't have to be told what's the meaning of a word. You just watch, you can find the meaning. And if you watch sufficiently large amount of text, like internet, you crawl internet, you can build computational models which can represent the meaning of a word as a vector and do all the arithmetic like king minus queen is man minus woman, or do all the number manipulation that you want to do, can all be working on such representation that can be learned from such data with no human being telling what's the relationship between king and queen, or man and woman, or past tense and present tense, or verb forms. Nothing need to be told. And this worked. So the NLP people went further, like creating very nice, interesting talks. For example, take 3 sentences, shuffle, and tell me what's the order of the sentences. A number of proxy tasks were created by looking at the raw data that helped us today to build ChatGPT that we all use, which now has capability to complete sentences, capability to complete paragraphs, capability to answer questions, capability to generate text and images, capability to harvest and use user feedbacks. It is not obvious to any of us today whether LLMs are really solving the problem by understanding, or is it by simple data, like by observing it, it has learned some pattern. There are lot more things for us to know how much it is able to go. And naturally, the area evolved further. People moved to multimodal. Why are you limiting to LLMs to text? The natural, easy way for humans to consume is modalities like speech and vision. People used extensively. Not only that, if you look at today, in the multimodal LLM surveys, you see a large number of LLMs, which many of you may recognize than me, that use in computational science, medical, healthcare, chemistry, biology, science, computational examples at every level. Such fundamental models, and most of them are trained with the help of self-supervised learning on large amount of data than being told by humans many, many times. And here's an example of how this area is growing. Just in 2024, in the last quarters, you can see how things are changing fast, and the type of active, like a different type of LLMs and foundational models evolving for solving problems in different areas in the lab. And many of them are open, some of them are proprietary, some of them are academic prototypes, some of them are domain specific, all of them. Before I end, I just want to show you some simple examples of, if I just stop here, you may say, no, no, what do you do then? Okay, what is my cup of tea? My cup of tea is to use some of these tricks to do some interesting things. It is sometimes good to work on these areas like ours because we can solve cool problems, simple problems. Like I want the guru of AI, the machine learning, Andrew Ng, the very famous Stanford professor who taught machine learning, to teach machine learning in Hindi.
कंप्यूटर विजन उन क्षेत्रों में से एक है जो डीप लर्निंग की बदौलत तेजी से आगे बढ़ रहा है। डीप लर्निंग कंप्यूटर विजन अब सेल्फ ड्राइविंग कारों को यह पता लगाने में मदद कर रहा है कि अन्य कारें और उनके आसपास पैदल यात्री कहाँ हैं।
That helps the people in different disciplines for teaching scaling education. And if I am not showing anything on chemistry, you may say, I don't know chemistry also. I'll show you a chemistry example too.
We talked about the relationship between the wavelength, the frequency, and the speed of electromagnetic radiation. In fact, the product of the wavelength and the frequency is its speed.
So I'll play maybe the video again. So this and there.
We talked about the relationship between the wavelength, the frequency, and the speed.
So this entire speech is generated by only observing the lip waves.
And the frequency is its speed.
So which means I can look from here and know what the person in the back row is murmuring. And what can you do with this? Here's an example of
our work opens up a major application in the domain of assistive technology. It can now provide a voice to those who have lost their ability to speak due to several types of illness. Here is a patient suffering from ALS, who can mouth words but cannot make sounds due to paralyzed vocal cords, speaking using our algorithm. Please note that it is impossible to collect speech data for such patients, and the fact our model works well on him indicates its robustness.
I am tired. Let mobile phone speak for you.
We hope such applications of lip-to-speech synthesis are popularized in due time, since they are non-invasive and cost-effective. Here
is one more example.
Shami Bhaiya, I think he was doing rehab and he was bowling at a very 120 wala pace, like for us, something utna pace pe. But I thought, okay, he's gonna bowl 120 and he promised कि वो मुझे body पे ball नहीं खिलाएंगे.
The future of video call could be a lot.
One of the main applications of our work is in compressing talking face videos to extremely compact representations, which can lead to serious bandwidth savings. Our network makes it possible to transmit only 8x8 talking face video frames across the network and generate the 256x256 versions in the receiver's end. To further improve compression, we train a frame interpolation network at the 8x8 scale. This network consists of a simple 3D CNN-based encoder-decoder architecture that can convert a 5 fps.
There is a worry of generation. When in the era of hardware, we wanted the best camera, we want the best microphone so that the digital quality is as good as possible. We were championing for that. In the era of software-driven generation, like graphics, movies, TTS, you want the best quality. We are all asking for it. Now the data gives you that. You're worried about it. So do you want the best quality generation? If so, what are the issues? So we don't know. On one hand, we are interested, we want the best quality generation like deep fakes. And when it creates, you complain it's a deep fake and it's a problem. We don't know how to handle this. These are interesting issues which are going to come into the picture soon. Thank you.
All right, we move to our next presentation by Dr. Shiva Rudra Raju, who is an associate professor at the Garinger Institute for Engineering. His research focuses on the mathematical and computational modeling of emergent phenomena in materials that are driven by mechanics and multiphysics. Microstructural evolution,
the renowned Silk City has evolved
processes,
into a
and
vibrant
bifurcations are of
educational hub.
particular interest. This work draws heavily from continuum physics, solid mechanics, thermodynamics, variational methods, FEM, and HPC. Broadly, it involves developing
among the 7 Indian
phenomenological descriptions of constituent processes, numerical formulation of the governing equations, and developing scalable code infrastructure. Wow. Okay. Shiva.
Give me a second to pull this up. That should open. Is this one? That's okay. Great to be here. Wonderful conference. I had good time since yesterday, and thanks to IASCR and the director for hosting us, and thanks to Professor Venu and Professor Jawahar for letting me be part of this AI forum. And since I've been here, I had really good time. Thanks for all your hospitality and the remarkable place you put us across the Bay of Bengal. I've been enjoying my time. Okay, so while my colleagues here are experts in AI and have given you the broad perspective in terms of AI development, its application, challenges, and opportunities, I'd like to link it a little more closer to this conference with AI in the context of materials. And most of what I'm going to show is a general commentary of both challenges and opportunities of AI in materials. Some of that derives from my own work earlier at the University of Wisconsin, and earlier at the University of Michigan, and for the last 6-7 years at the University of Wisconsin. So because I try to touch upon a lot of topics and it's a little bit difficult to stitch them together, I thought an outline will help of what you would be expecting in the next 15-20 minutes. Now I'll start off with the context of what do we mean by materials and the broader international paradigms of computational development in materials. For some of you, these are very obvious words like MGI, Material Genome Initiative, and ICME, Integrated Computational Materials Engineering. These are paradigms on which a lot of material community has been focusing for the last 2 decades. And then I'll proceed to this general idea of using computing as a digital twin to experimentation for material discovery. And there comes this concept of process structure property performance, PSPP. And that's not a $1 billion question, it's really a $100 billion question. That is the holy grail of material science, been for a decade, and it'll be the holy grail for probably 1 or 2 more decades. And it's in that context, getting PSPP relations where computational methods help and AI will help much more, hopefully. And then I'll move to setting up computations and the underlying complexity, computational complexity, in a way that motivates AI usage in materials. Then talk a little bit about introducing AI methods in materials, and then focus on certain use cases, success stories of AI, how AI has been helping us in material science. I'll be dealing with 3 success stories, one of them from my own research, one from a research I was associated a few years back, and one is a very famous example you guys all know. Again, this conference is interesting because it's a materials conference, but it's very focused on polymers and advanced materials. And I wanted to protect myself from all the polymer scientists jumping onto me. So I want to define what materials and what are we going to talk about, right? Again, this is not a unique representation. It's just one representation of the classification of materials. You could slice them different ways. And of course, along with materials, there are associated technologies in manufacturing and characterization and performance. So from my point, this is really, the spectrum over which a lot of material science day-to-day research happens. My own research is a lot into metals and alloys and composite, and to some degree advanced manufacturing. But I know I'll try to make connection to polymers, but that's not my expertise. This is just to give you a sense, because not all of you are aware of computational side of material research. This is just a small collage from my research over the last 7-8 years.
looking at how computational methods pre-AI have always been already been helping us and really give us some good predictive ability. What you're looking at there, if I can use the pointer, don't worry, no worry. So what you're looking at is a small collage. The first one on the top left is the microstructure of metals. If you take any metal, put it under a microscope, you look at a grain microstructure. Then on the right side of it, there is a microstructure in little more advanced materials, starting with shape memory alloys and much more nano textured materials recently. The bottom one is something which all of us are interested, what happens in your iPhone or battery, phone batteries, as you charge, discharge, lithium ion, advection, diffusion kinetics. And this is my favorite, which is essentially, you'll recognize that's the skin of the cheetah, but it's again a material science problem. Alan Turing set up one of his great research beyond his exploits in computing. One of his last great things, he opened up a field for us called morphogenesis through his paper on the chemical basis of morphogenesis, and that extend to biological creatures into something called embryogenesis, where it is a classic material science problem. Quickly, just as a motivation, what you're looking at is expansion of those collages. These are computations we performed. As I run this, and I'll keep talking, the green one is actually crack propagation in a very high fidelity simulation of the Boeing 787, some work we did with Boeing a few years back. The red circle is the microstructure in metallic objects. The one on the bottom left is when you charge your phone, that is the lithium kinetics. And when that kinetics is affected, there's something called dendritic formation, and when your iPhone catches fire, it's related to that. And this is embryogenesis, represented on a simpler, circular embryo, how pattern formation takes place using, reaction diffusion kinetics. Okay? So this is when we mean by materials research from a computational point of view. This is a selection of kind of problems which we used to deal with traditional methods, and later with high performance computing, now with extreme scale computing, and now with AI. So to appreciate, for the ones on the microstructure, this really are near petascale computations, ran on 10,000 to 100,000 processors. And at this time, they were one of the, the best computations in terms of computational complexity. So now getting into the motivation of, as we are excited about AI, this excitement didn't start today. About 15 years back, the materials community realized computational methods have come a long way, and the concept of digital twins started coming in. And there was this idea, can we really use computations to supplant, experiments? Can discovery start from first principles, and can we predict materials from first principles? We thought so, and out came this thing called the Material Genome Initiative. And it's such high profile that, President Obama actually announced this in a State of the Union address. And sort of the brief he gave in that address was, MGI would allow us to discover things twice as fast and at a fraction of a second. When you're looking, current material continuum for centuries, when you start with Bronze Age, Iron Age, all our ages, that was how we started with discovery all the way to deployment. It took centuries. Now with computational power, we want to actually go to a future material continuum where all of this has shrunk to less than a decade or a few years. That's the brief of Material Genomes Initiative. And we have been at it, and I have been working on it for now a little more than 10 years. This is a good perspective for where AI is headed, and I'll talk about the limitations and both the opportunities here in a bit. And this is how MGI or material discovery in MGI looks in real world. And the reason I brought up MGI is we are now re-envisioning MGI in the context of AI, actually, AI, ML, and DM. What you're looking at in the past, you would go to you would fabricate something, go to a lab, put it under an MTS machine, test, get properties, right? Now with our understanding of fundamental science, starting from quantum mechanics all to the continuum scale, we think we can use digital twin ideas and really produce everything from first principles. And that's one such framework I was involved with in a DOE Center of Material Genome Initiative at Michigan. So we put together this, and what you're looking at is about $25 million of work. But what it integrates at the left scale, quantum mechanics, density functional theory, all the way till deployable port-scale characterization. There's a little bit of experimentation to reinforce the learning, if I can use Jawhar's language. But then this is where we want to go. That was the past, this is the future. It's been the future for 10 years, but it's what we realized is there are some fundamental problems in the science and computation, and AI will definitely help, but AI is bound to run into the same kind of challenges. So I'll talk a little bit about the science of the material discovery, and that will link to the challenges we are facing. You know, when you just take a small paper and tear it, or just take a rubber band, polymer, and expand it, you know, the physics starts at much lower scales. And depending on the property of interest and the material, we have to go down to extremely low scales. For example, in metallic alloys, for most properties, for structural properties like the moduli, you don't have to, you can pretty much do something at the continuum scale. But for most other properties, you have to zoom in to the quantum scale and build everything ground up to predict properties. Why is this? Because this science of materials has a hierarchical nature. And you know, I really want you to appreciate this, because this is where the scientific challenge of using AI with traditional method lies, and how we need to innovate in AI to make it useful for such problems. And why, to give you a sense of where this comes in, you know, even this small system, it's not so small, involves a lot of nonlinearity and a lot of chaotic phenomena and a study of complex systems. And you know, for those of you who are from the physics side, you know, one of the best notes in science I've ever read was this 3-page note by P.W. Anderson, the great P.W. Anderson, who revolutionized the area of symmetry breaking that led to the standard model of particle physics and got the Nobel Prize for him. You know, he wrote this 3-page note widely available on the internet called "More is Different." Basically, in 3 pages, using ammonia and a few other examples, what he motivates is reductionism in science has limitations. You can reduce and go to first principles, but when you come back, reductionism cannot produce everything, cannot produce all the science. At every scale, length scale and time scale, new scientific principles are thrown out. Okay? So basically, this is an argument against reductionism, and this essentially our approaches today in computational methods and AI, some level assume a level of reductionism. So this is something which keeps telling us that, you know, we need to innovate little more than traditional AI methods to use them in the context of these scientific problems. So the first concept I introduced was material genome initiative. At the operative level, material genome initiative takes in the paradigm of something called ICME, something again very popular, probably, you know, there are probably, you know, hundreds of thousands of papers already on this, which is integrated computational materials engineering. What this sense is, essentially it says that, you know, when you look at most materials and their usage in end products, there are 4 things which are important from a characterization, fabrication, and deployment point of view. One is the manufacturing process. What is the microstructure or the underlying structure of the material that process leads to? Depending on that structure, what are the properties one could predict, or actually one obtains? And then what are the performance from those properties? So really the four keywords are process, structure, property, and performance. And on the bottom you see the challenge with this, getting these properties, are the length scales and time scales they are active on. For example, a manufacturing process would be from meter to millimeters, but the structure suddenly zooms in to micrometers or even nanometers. Again, you have to come back to millimeters for doing some characterization, then again meters, right? So you're jumping across length scales as you go across this sort of spectrum of properties. And it's not just length scales. I'm showing only length scales, but equivalent time scales, all the way from minutes to probably femtosecond processes are involved. So that is ICME. And using an example of an engine head, an aluminum engine head, this is how it looks really. You know, you have a CAD geometry, you do some casting, that's the process, then get some thermal history, that's again a process, that leads to a microstructure. From that out comes property, and the ultimate performance is in terms of the strength, the weight, the failure resistance, whatnot. But now I'm moving into motivating why traditional computational methods, which we developed for 40 years now, don't help us much, and why AI is needed. What are the computational cost of these methods, the computational complexity? N is, I'm just using the standard O notation in computational complexity. Assume n is the degrees of freedom. For a typical problem like this, that's about 1 million to 10, 20 million degrees of freedom. So now look at, in our current state of the art, the computational complexity for certain, essentially for the process and the property are of order n, very easy. But the structure, it's enormous, order n4. If n is of the order of 1 million or 10 million, n to the power of 4, that's really beyond even exascale. That is very difficult. Come back, prediction, order n square, that's still very complex. Yeah, again, when we come to performance, it's slightly easy, right? So all of this using traditional computational methods, high performance computing, and when I say high performance computing, I'm really talking about petascale and exascale, the state of the art. Even for them, some of these arrows are not yet accessible. And it's here that artificial intelligence, ML, deep learning, machine learning and deep learning have been very promising and actually have been very encouraging. The initial results have been encouraging. So this is, again, I borrowed this figure from a Nature paper. It really captures how science in the context of materials has been evolving for a few centuries now. My colleagues showed, how these things evolved in the context of, social sciences with ChatGPT, telegraphy, telephony, ChatGPT, and everything, right? In the context of materials, a lot of initial chemistry and physics was empirical science, leading to theoretical science. For the last half century, we moved from the second paradigm to the third paradigm. For the last half century, with the advent of computers and more powerful algorithms and computers, we've been dealing with computational science. And really what AI in materials is now being referred to as the fourth paradigm, where now learning comes into the picture, and it really leads to better characterization, performance, and prediction. But then one has to be careful. This is not a linear sort of step-up process. We believe we have a very good understanding of the empirical science. We have a good understanding of theoretical science. Still some problems in terms of the reductionism. We don't know all the physical principles yet from a thermodynamics point of view and information theory point of view, but we have a good handle. The third paradigm, which we have been working for 30, 40 years now, made excellent progress, but it's still very much a work in progress, both in terms of computational methods, solver strategies, algorithms, and how you apply science using those methods. So the third paradigm is not yet solved by any means. It's still work in progress, but now comes the fourth paradigm, which is AI-enabled materials discovery. What I'm excited is actually the fourth paradigm, we think, will actually help us both with improving the second and third paradigm. And when we say AI in materials or material discovery, it will not be AI alone. It's a combination of all these four paradigms, but AI will be one of the enablers, and it will actually accelerate this process. So I did already guess that with AI experts like Venu and Jawahar, there's no point me getting into AI methods. So this is just a quick snapshot of the traditional workflow. In most AI scheme, nothing specific to materials, and this is where the challenge is also. If you look at a lot of PhD thesis today of AI application in materials, it's some different versions of this or more modern versions. We just pick up methods developed by the Gen AI community, the language community, the image processing community, the pattern recognition community, and directly apply those methods to material science. They work well for certain aspects, they don't well for certain other aspects. So this is again a good representation of how AI application is kicking into materials. And some of you from polymer science will relate very well to this. The first generation was structure property, wherein from experimentations or microscopy imaging, we knew the structure, and using that structure with some amount of computation, you could predict the property. That was the first generation of computational methods. The second generation said, hey, we'll do little more than that. Let's say we don't even know the structure. We just know the composition, the chemical formula, and we don't know the realistic structures. Maybe we can even predict the structure, and from the structure do the performance. We can actually automate both the process. And now where we are saying we don't even want to know the composition. There's a whole library. There's the periodic table, either in pharmacology or drug discovery or polymer science or metallic alloys. Let's take the whole periodic table and optimize things, actually predict the composition. From the composition, go to the structure and then the performance. One of the projects which did a lot of this for the last 10 years was the batteries community. They have been actually scavenging, sort of going through the entire periodic table, trying to find the best combinations and the best compositions which will lead to the performance, right? So really, the state of the art today is in third generation, where deterministic methods are being augmented by statistical methods, primarily driven by machine learning and deep learning. Okay, I'll not get into the types of learning and model selection. The others have covered it, and that's a little more generic, nothing specific to materials. So, in the best of my understanding, and what happens nowadays in conferences, people have been debating, if we take current AI methods, all the traditional learning methodologies, including Gen AI, and applied them to materials discovery, are they immediately applicable? If you look back at this chart when I showed the process structure property performance, certain mathematical equations and the data generated is very AI-able. You can take existing methods and apply them to sort of get your results. Certain things, especially the microstructure prediction and the property predictions, did not yield much results yet. They're extremely complex. And I don't want to drum down your excitement with AI, but indicate the challenges. For example, all of you know the problem of turbulence. Starting with Newton to Einstein, everyone till today we have been working with turbulence. And if you look at a car, just a car moving, if you take a small centimeter cube and try to resolve the turbulence up to Kolmogorov scales with direct simulations from first principles, even the biggest supercomputer can't do it today. And even a simple problem of turbulence has not been captured with any method of AI yet, because there's so much scale-dependent complexity in physics and new phenomena occurring that we have not yet learned. So this is a caution that today AI is not fully enabled for material science. For certain scales, yes, it holds a lot of promise, and that's where state-of-the-art research is going on. So I just want you to be cautiously optimistic about how AI helps materials discovery. So quickly, I'll go into some success stories. This is something, it'll cut closer to home. So if you're aware of, again, materials discovery, computations, AI, there's an underlying computational infrastructure aspect of it. How big are the computations we are talking about? So if some of you are from the ACM community, there's this thing called the Supercomputing Conference, and there's something called the Gordon-Well Prize, which every year rewards the biggest state-of-the-art supercomputing calculation of that year. And this essentially gets reported in the US Congress and makes big waves, right? And this is for this year, actually. So it says 23, the 24 one didn't happen. So this was essentially an application of quantum computing calculations using density functional theory. I had the good opportunity to be one of the founding developers of this code framework when I was in Michigan, but ever since I've moved to Wisconsin. So the team I had worked with, my old colleagues, they have continued that work, initially with deterministic methods, now have brought in a lot of AI methods to get exchange correlations and the underlying DFT methodologies. With AI assistance, they have been able to do a computation with 650 petaflops. That is the biggest computation as of today, meaning that's, of course, why they got the award. And the resources they used the only exascale computer, at least till 6 months back, at Oak Ridge National Lab. That's about 1 million CPUs and 10 million GPUs. If I got my number, 10 million is about 1 crore GPUs. You can imagine, when you run this computation, you have to feed it the electricity of a small town, okay? So the lucky thing, this was done by a group in Michigan, and my old colleague, who's now a professor at IISc Bangalore, Fanny Motamari. That way, India got its first Gordon-Well Prize this year. You should look it up. Very fascinating work. And that was enabled because of AI-based recognition of exchange correlation and associated physics. The second success story is out of my own group, wherein it's more about a manufacturing process. You all are aware of welding. One of the modern advancements is welding, is called friction stir welding, where you really don't have any additive material. You actually use the idea of friction. You run a roller on top of the welded parts, use friction to generate heat and to melt the material and to actually weld it together. So if you're looking at here, that's a very small cartoon of the process. What you're looking below is the numerical simulation, a very high fidelity simulation of the process. But I want you to focus at that small sort of stream of blue in the bottom. That's an underlying hole or a defect in the weld. And this is immensely important for the aerospace community, the automotive community, where they use FSW, but there's a lot of defects kicking in. So we wanted to study this. We did a hell lot of numerical computations. But then it came down to finding the process parameters. We ended up using different, deep learning sort of and machine learning techniques to obtain some of that. And we were extremely happy when this got validated. What you're looking at is the Argonne National Labs Advanced Photon Source, essentially a huge particular accelerator. It takes a few kilometers for you to walk around that. That's my student, Mohammad Ansari, working in the accelerator trying to image. After we did the learning, we put the processes and did the prediction of defects. And again, if you're not from the community, you may not immediately get it. What essentially is modern AI-based methods helped us identify the parameters in a way that we could have a better manufacturing process out of friction stir welding. Okay. So I believe I have limited time. So quickly, the last example is a great success story. Even a pessimist like me, who initially thought, AI has limited application, this really, made the case for all of us, and something all of you are aware, sort of the success of AlphaFold. Probably now it's AlphaFold 3 or 4, I don't remember. What it really demonstrated that, yes, these methods can accelerate the problem, in this case, protein folding and protein structure determination, immensely. If you're a mathematician like me, this is very significant, because for us, for decades, the problem here was we have excellent local optimization methods, but we don't have global optimization methods in mathematics in general. And that was stopping us from really doing fast prediction of protein folding. But somehow the AI methods could circumvent all this and really give us global minimizers with relatively small amount of training. And this has been a phenomenal success of AI in the context of general materials. When I look at this examples, I'm convinced that, sooner than later, it will prop into other aspects of materials. And actually, as I said, I presented the different paradigms. AI-assisted material discovery will improve and augment the other three paradigms. With that, just a summary of where we are. Again, just saying that, we are really working towards data-driven science and ML in materials. That's the fourth paradigm. And as I said, we hope that paradigm will not just deliver the results, it will also help us improve the second and third paradigms better than we do today. Thank you.
All right, how are we doing on time? Yeah, I think we have 5 more minutes, 15. Okay, so here is what we will do. I'll keep my talk short so we can spend more time on the panel, which will be more interactive and interesting. But thank you, Shiva. That is indeed an amazing success story of AI with the protein folding understanding. Really huge success there. So I'm going to also talk about computer science viewpoint of AI, just like Jawahar did, but from a different angle. Documents. Where are the 3 presentations? Yeah. All right, so essentially my presentation is about AI for public good. Earlier on, Provost Weber mentioned about some of the apprehensions, with AI, and there was a quote from one of our faculty members which said that, maybe, I'm just paraphrasing over here, that maybe AI can do all these things in a good enough way and kind of make us redundant, perhaps. And there are other apprehensions also in terms of misinformation, disinformation, where, AI can do so much harm when it creates fake things which look very real, for example, fake news and fake videos and so on. But we are looking at AI for public good, and there are certain applications where, AI squarely falls, in the domain of public good. And that is when we are looking at learning, and especially learning, where we are looking at disparities, and we are also trying to overcome disabilities, that certain disadvantaged populations may have. So also it was mentioned that in the US, there are these NSF AI institutes. This is one of the most competitive things that you can win. $20 million over 5 years, and UB is leading one of those institutes. There are 27 such institutes that have been awarded over the last 5 years or so. So about $550 million of investment in these AI institutes. And 5 of these 27 are actually in the space of education. So there is one from North Carolina where you're looking at the concept of learning based on narratives. So storytelling and how can you capture concepts and bring AI tools to help with that. Then in Colorado, they are looking at collaborative learning. Oftentimes we do in class projects, we expect students to work in groups because there is learning, there is complementary things where you learn from your friends, certain parts you explain, certain parts they explain, and there is a collaborative learning that is happening. Can you model that? And how can AI help? That is the project at Colorado. Georgia Tech is looking at personalized learning. Different students have different abilities, different understanding of the prerequisites. So how can you tailor the learning material and personalize it, and also allow it for remote learning? So that's Georgia Tech's focus. Illinois Urbana-Champaign is looking at the equity issue of making education accessible. And at UB, we are looking at learning for children, as was mentioned, children who have speech and language disabilities. So what I'm going to do is, I'm going to structure my talk with some fundamental artificial intelligence problems that we are trying to address with this backdrop of speech and language learning. So if you look at speech language impairment, about 5 to 10% of Americans may have communication disorders. And by the first grade, roughly 5% of our children, have some kind of an issue with speech and language. More than 3 million Americans, suffer from this. And so we are looking at artificial intelligence across the spectrum of autism, speech language is being one aspect of that. And, so we first looked at the different types of disabilities as defined by, the US Department of Education. There are 13 such types of disabilities, and many of them have speech language, component involved in them. So if you actually look at these 13 different disabilities, speech and language is involved for about 3.4 million children. So we have 3.4 million children who need some kind of help, firstly in identifying them as having that need, and then coming up with some intervention tools which can assist them in overcoming, whatever gaps exist. So we are looking at the speech language communication, and speech in a more broadly defined way also includes writing, right? So writing is also kind of speech, right? When we talk about freedom of speech, when we write, that's also an expression. So there is writing, and then there is speaking, and then there are non-verbal communications. For example, you can have communication just by facial expressions. And if you look at in the emotional setting, of learning, if somebody is, you can look at the distress, doubt, interest, contemplation, confusion. All these can be communicated in a non-verbal way, and AI, can play a role in all of these as well. So we are trying to see, how AI can help with writing and speech by just observing these children, and there will be certain metrics defined, and once they have been identified, as I mentioned, how can we develop the intervention tools. So there has been some discussion on exactly what is intelligence, right? So when we talk about artificial intelligence, first we need to know what intelligence is, and there are different definitions. The one that is commonly used in the AI field is the one given by Marvin Minsky, where, this is a very nice quote, which says, what magical trick makes us intelligent? The trick is that there is no trick. The power of intelligence stems from our vast diversity, not from any single perfect principle. So essentially the idea over here, Marvin Minsky says is it's all about doing different tasks, and learning to do these tasks well is what intelligence is all about. So it's a whole bunch of tasks, where you can become, where you can be good at. And then Alan Turing defined artificial intelligence in this following way, where he said that if you have a screen, and on the one side of the screen there are two entities, one is the machine and the other is the human being, and on the other side of the screen there is the human interpreter. If the human interpreter is confused as to which one is the machine and human on the other side, that means the machine is able to mimic human-like conversations, then you would say that the machine is artificially intelligent. So that was the original definition, but clearly, now with so many chatbots available, that conversation, we actually believe, right? I mean, if you go to any customer service and there is a chat conversation taking place, it will be very difficult for you to tell that it's actually a chatbot on the other side. Okay, so they are quite intelligent. But then intelligence, goes beyond that, as we know. It's not just simple conversations, but there is a lot more in that communication. So the Turing test, needs to be more, it has to be probably tweaked. So, using this definition of Turing for artificial intelligence, if you recall about 10, 15 years back, we were all inundated with what we call CAPTCHAs. And I forget now the full form of CAPTCHA, but it's essentially a test to tell humans and computers apart. Okay, so that's what CAPTCHA stands for. And you would remember that we had these squiggly codes that were written, nonsensical words, and you were supposed to just type them in, and by typing them correctly, you are essentially passing the test of being a human being, right? So the idea was that machines are not able to read these codes. So there is a sweet spot where there are certain tasks which humans can do effortlessly, easily, and machines are not able to do so, okay? So those were what were called CAPTCHAs to distinguish between humans and machines. So you can see over there, those codes, we can read it, I mean, not with too much difficulty, but machines fail on many of those, used to fail on many of those. So here is a chart to show, how that sweet spot of what machines can do and what humans can do and who is superior can be explained. And so those who work in computer science like Jawahar, computer vision, we all remember that in the late 1990s is where the OCR field started, and you can see the curve for handwriting recognition. It moves, the performance improves, and the zero line is the human performance. So the machine performance catches up with human performance and actually exceeds human performance. Today, you have machines which can read handwriting in certain applications better than humans, okay? And then you look at speech recognition also. Today, when many of the fancy cars, you can speak to the car and you can dial and you can talk and you can get messages sent, and the speech understanding is quite good. So you can see that green curve over there, and once again, you can see that in certain applications, machines can recognize speech better than humans. And then reading comprehension, and now with ChatGPT language understanding, you can give it a paper and ask it to summarize. It can do a pretty good job of understanding that material. So for many different applications now, the machines are able to perform better than human beings. So what happens to that sweet spot? How do you now tell a human from a machine going by that Turing test? So we go back and say, well, where do humans have the edge? And we all did this in psychology classes, remember? There is all these principles, the Gestalt principles, where humans are able to follow some of these rules in a very natural way. So, similarity, for example, in the first block, we are able to somehow see the diagonal because the squares look similar and you perceive diagonals over there. Proximity, so now you see two rows, and if you connect them, you see two columns and so on. And then you have the closure, enclosure, the figure and background and so on. So there are various things where human perception somehow through evolution is able to do these tasks very naturally. Now, can machines do these? And if not, maybe that is the way we can test and tell, whether it is a bot or a human being on the other side. So we said, let's look at what machines can do. And we gave handwriting like this on the left side. You can see it's not easy to read. We will struggle to read what is actually written over there. And when this was given to ChatGPT 4.0, it was not able to read it at all, okay? And then we gave it the context, we gave it the prompt that was used to generate that particular paragraph. And when ChatGPT got that prompt, it is able to get it completely correct. So if you give the context, machine is able to do better than humans. Okay, so it got the entire paragraph where you and I will struggle. So we then said, well, so what should we do? These captures, the old captures where we were counting on the fact that these are nonsensical words and human beings are able to read them and machines are not, and that is what was being used to tell them apart. But today with the LLM models, and this is actually happening today on the Indian Railways booking platform, that's where those captures are from. And if you give it to Google or Azure or Amazon or GPT-4, actually half of those captures can be read, which means that particular site, half the time can be compromised. Okay? So clearly, context where we thought humans can do better when there is no context is not true anymore. And when you give context, it's doing better than humans. So do we even have a spot where humans can actually be superior, is the question. So then what we said was, let's look at handwriting. So those are all machine-generated codes. What happens if you look at handwriting, and you can see the example images over here, and we gave these images, we trained the OCR on some of these images, and we see that about 38% of these are recognized by a trained OCR, and the LLM, is getting about 15%. Okay, 15% is still not very good, which means about 1 in 6 or 7 times the site can be compromised. Then we said, just for fun, okay, so handwriting, no context, context, both machine can do better, and it is able to do some of the handwritten images. What about doctor's handwriting? John, we said, maybe that is a test, because we are not sure actually whether the doctor can read their own handwriting after a few days. Okay, so maybe there's a lot of guesswork there. But look at these. These are real examples taken from doctors' prescriptions, and a trained OCR can get 86, 87%, and ChatGPT can get 60%. So it can read. So it's getting quite good in reading those as well. So then we said, okay, so what else can we use? Where are humans going to be superior? Where do humans have the edge? So we created some of these, and here what we found was that machines right now are not able to get the perspective and direction very well. So if we give codes like that, and we said, just give the sequence in clockwise direction. Start from any one letter and give me the clockwise sequence. So the machines are almost failing all the time. Okay, so now you might say, well, maybe ChatGPT needs to get trained, but that's not how LLMs work, as Jawahar will tell you. So right now, when you have some sense of perspective or positioning, machines are not doing that well. Then we gave other examples, like, in the second row, you can see we just drew arrows. You and I can quickly say, what is that sequence of letters? And the machine is not able to do that at all, 0%. Then we said, we put an arrow in the lower examples you see. We said, put an arrow and say, follow the arrow and give me the sequence on the right side of the arrow. Okay, so basically you have to position yourself, follow the arrow and decide right and left. Machine couldn't do any of them. ChatGPT couldn't do it. The same with the row above that. We simply said, just go left to right. You and I, because of Gestalt laws, we have a sequencing. We look at proximity and continuity, and we can do the sequence quite easily. And the machines are failing. So there is still hope for humans in some of these applications where we can still outperform the machine. So going back to Minsky's definition, there are a whole bunch of these tasks today, and in very narrow applications, the machines are doing very well, and humans better than humans, but there still exist certain areas where humans can do better. And then we looked at a whole bunch of these technologies, as to how humans are performing compared to machines. So we said, okay, let's look at dyslexia, because that is the backdrop that we said we're going to look at all these applications for. So when you look at dyslexia and dysgraphia, we looked at certain examples. By the way, these are just definitions on dyslexia. Difficulty in word recognition, decoding and encoding, and dysgraphia is difficulty in the handwriting, hand movements. So we looked at examples like these to check first, so looking at handwriting of children, you can see an example over there. It's not that easy, okay? It doesn't come right away as to what the words are, because the spacing between the words is not properly done. But when you give it to the machine, we'll see later on that it can do it quite easily. So these are examples of dyslexia and dysgraphia, with various aspects like, relative alignment, spacing, planning, inversions, where a P is written in its mirror image, and so on. So we looked at all of these examples for dysgraphia and dyslexia, trying to see, what machines can do over here. We also compared adult versus child's handwriting. So the problem is, most of these machine learning models, as was explained, we need lots and lots of examples right now, okay? And there isn't that much examples for children's handwriting. But given that, if you look at, the output from ChatGPT, so we gave it this example over here, and ChatGPT is getting the passage correct because it is using the context and it is correcting for the spelling errors and all the dyslexia and dysgraphia things that you would want the machine to tell you. It's overcorrecting, right? So it's like an autocorrect on your phone. So it goes and corrects, for example, the voice, the word voice, you can see is misspelled. It corrects it, the word there, it corrects the spelling, and so on. So what is happening over here is, if you wanted to identify the places where the children are making mistakes so that you can then screen them as having, dyslexia, then ChatGPT is not a good idea for you, because it just goes and gives you the correct answer right away. It doesn't tell you where the child is having a problem. Here there are more examples. Again, I'm looking at different examples on how you can see different letters which are, for example, the second line, the last word, you can see that the thing has been flipped, the mirror image. Instead of badly, I think it's written as something else. It should have been a G, so it goes and corrects it as a G. So we are looking at how LLMs are going to fail in identifying, the screening that we want for children. And here are more examples. You can see it's not easy to read the children's handwriting for humans, okay? And we gave it to ChatGPT, and it does a pretty good job. It says, what's that sound? Oh, a fish seller. You can see that it's doing it correctly. And then at the end, the word that is missing is also predicted and filled in. So going back to what Jawahar was saying, it's actually using the context and correcting everything for you. So I think what is going on over here is, if there is no context, machines can do well. If there is context, it can do well. But what it cannot do, like humans, is to actually use context only when necessary and not when we don't want it, okay? And there has to be a way of scaling this. So how much context to use and when is what you and I can do, and the machines are not going to be able to do. I'm going to skip that. Here is another example. So if we ask humans to see what this child has done over here, it's not going to be easy, okay? You'll struggle to see what the child has written. But ChatGPT goes and gives you the correct interpretation right away. And it can ignore the drawing as well. Here are more examples. Similarly, ignores the drawings, corrects all the mistakes, and gives you, what it should be. So we are also looking at how speech and handwriting connect. Okay, so perhaps there are ways, because we are told that, when we are children, in order to memorize certain passages and certain poems, if you keep writing it, it helps you memorize. So perhaps there are some cognitive pathways that are connected with the hand motor movements, and there is also perhaps some connections between speech and handwriting. So if there are areas, words where children are struggling in writing, perhaps they're also struggling when they're actually trying to speak them. So we are looking at some, ways of using handwriting for this, to study this connection between speech, disability and handwriting disability. So I'm going to move quickly over here. We are also looking at speech for children, and this is using the state-of-the-art speech recognizer for a child speaking, and you can see that it makes so many mistakes. Okay, so that's again an area still where humans are doing better. And in this case, the primary reason is that there isn't enough data sets, of children's speech, which we are actually collecting right now. So we are looking at using AI tools for screening. So where a kid can be watching, on TV, and then there is a robot which prompts it to say certain things, and then it's observing and seeing if there is any kind of a speech impediment that the child is having. We are also looking at studying children in groups to see if they are actually participating in the conversation, what kind of nonverbal cues do they have, whether they are interacting, understanding, and so on, automatically by a robot, and trying to come up with various interventions. We actually have come up with an application tool where, today's speech language pathologists, they use what are called flashcards. So if a child is having trouble with a certain sound, then the pathologist will essentially come up with flashcards, with picture cards, with pairs of words where that one particular sound is contrasted. So it could be, for example, cake versus break. So only the initial sound is different, and they're trying to show, how the lip movement should be in order to produce that sound. So the challenge was that pathologists would have to carry all these flashcards, right? So what we are doing with generative AI is the pathologist can, on the fly, create pictures and different pairs of words and align it also with the cultural background that the child is going to be able to relate to, and also to the language. So that's something we are doing. This is again actually connecting with what Jawahar was showing with our partners at Stanford. What we're doing is essentially making somebody say what you want them to say, based on the right lip movements. And we are told that children who are having speech difficulties, if they see themselves making the correct lip movements in a mirror image, then they are more likely to correct it. So we are able to now make a child say the words correctly, and the child keeps looking at it, and then they eventually correct and make the correct sounds. So, there is a video I can play later on for this. And we are also looking at text enrichment, where in order to help children with reading, using generative AI techniques, we can take any passage and make it more or less difficult reading. So a fourth grader reading ability can be, take a passage from there, and you can make it a sixth grader or seventh grader, or take it down the other way, based on, where the child is when it comes to reading. So those are some of the projects that we're working on, and under our NSF AI project, AI Institute. And we have a nice space at University of Buffalo, the Sandbox, where we are hoping to have children come in and help us with doing some of these experiments. With that, let me close over here, and thank you very much. And we will move to the fireside chat now.
Now I would like to request the session chair to felicitate our speakers.
Um, Good evening, all of you. Meanwhile, I have three most important announcements for students, especially the tutorial students. I request all of you after these sessions, we have arranged a bus at 6:30 or 6 to 6:30 p.m. that will take you to the permanent campus. And those who have forgotten to collect your participation certificate, please collect it from the registration desk. Looks like some of you have not received it. And the third announcement is that that ICFPAM students who have registered for ICFPAM, so please be here. Dinner is served in the campus itself at the same place where we had the lunch. And the last announcement is that venue 5 is going to be venue 1. So all the talks where venue 5 will be shifted to venue 1. So please note these changes. Thank you all.
All right, so now that we're done with the presentations, this will be more of an interactive session, and it's your chance to ask questions of our panelists. So I will get us started right now with a question to Provost Weber. We have been seeing AI, essentially being talked about in various conference settings like this. And you have presented at UB, how AI is being looked at by in the classroom by our faculty. How do you see AI playing out over here? Will we be able to now use AI to, for example, test more of critical thinking among our students rather than rote learning? Something analogous to, will we have more open book exam questions rather than something that is written out? So what are your thoughts on this?
I think it's now, is it working? Now can you hear me? Yeah, oh, yeah, I think. So, as I tried to suggest during the chat I gave, I actually think it's imperative that universities move forward and faculty and students are using this technology. And Venu, I think, but the question is how. And we had a great lunchtime discussion about AI before this talk about it being a tool. And sometimes I've done it myself. Sometimes there's a parallel made to the calculator, handheld calculator. And I think there's some parallels there, but I think that it also falls apart because it's moving so fast and so much more powerful. And Venu just made the example of maybe an open book exam. Now, students that are still here with us, I think you love open book exams, right? Because you think you know the answers in there. But maybe we can twist that around a little bit. So suppose we ask a question like, well, how did Trump win the American presidency and how? That might be kind of an interesting question to ask AI. It's actually not the answer that's probably going to be the most interesting part, because you can craft an answer without that AI. But it's how do you prompt it? And then once you get those answers, how do you go to the next level and the next level? And then how do you figure out when you want to stop? And so it's not necessarily the answer that's interesting to me. It's how students or faculty in your research, whether you're thinking about generative AI, are approaching the problem. So I think it allows students to actually go down into fairly specific areas and really dive deep. And I recognize always there'll be bias, and I recognize all the times, but we all have bias anyway. We have bias every day in our lives. We create bias every day. Every one of us has our own bias. So I think there's a lot of potential there. The other thing that I think there's a little bit of potential, and I'll be quickly because I know we're sort of short time, is I'm wondering where AI could play a role. I talked a little bit about in clinics and things of that nature, but also in labs where we don't want to get rid of engaged labs in the physical environment, but we also could expand a lot of labs in the virtual environment, field trips that could be iterative, so you start down a field trip and you go different ways. So I think there's lots of different ways, Venu, to really approach this.
Yes, thank you for that response. Any comment, one comment from the audience on this topic of how AI is going to change the way we evaluate students? Anybody? Because there has been some discussion on, for example, instead of asking our students not to use ChatGPT, when writing, instead, ask them to use it, but then explain and in their submission as to how they prompted and how they changed the response that came back, and show more critical thinking and problem solving with ChatGPT as a tool. And I think, Scott, that is how probably things are going to evolve in this. Let me go next. There is a question quickly. Okay, John.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, that's a great question on how to get a student to not only use, but be able to critique the output of an AI. So there's tons of biases that are embedded in every one of these systems, how they were trained, the database they saw, lots and lots of biases. How does a human recognize these biases? And this is critical in AI applied to medicine. If we can't recognize that this AI is making an interpretation without a critical piece of history that is stated by the body language of a patient coming into a room, we're going to lose. We're going to make a bad diagnosis, we're going to go down a wrong pathway, and we'll have a bad outcome. So this is actually one of the critical challenges in teaching our students to use AI to recognize biases.
Thank you, John. Any comment, one comment from my panelists on this topic, Jawahar and Shiva? Okay, so maybe I can move to Jawahar to the question on generative AI. So Jawahar, you presented all these cool things that generative AI can do, and the future looks very exciting and lots of opportunities. What do you see as the biggest risk with the way LLMs are progressing and generative AI, the kinds of things it's able to do?
I think we all know the critical issues that we need to face in the AI today. So I touched upon towards the end of my presentation that we are developing the skill of discrimination and generation together. Both are interconnected skills, and we need to understand how this machine generated content will exist along with human generated content. So, and what are the ethical ways of them coexisting? So we had for decades concerns about like when human can generate content, when machine generated content, what's the freedom of such generation, what's the freedom of such distribution. So this all will have to be reimagined in the era of AI. And this also leads to like fundamental questions on what algorithmic changes are required. Like how, as a researcher in this area, what are the algorithmic ways of handling and where this will lead to? As a legal framework, what is really required? What type of regulations can control it the right way? There is no, so that you may see two extreme views, one a very liberal view, one way very strong, say, restrictions on such generations. So there may be somewhere in between a pathway is what I'm seeing. And this is going to be a serious issue in the AI. So the bias and the many other ethical issues that people always talk about, they all will coexist with that.
So, a few years back, there was a lot of talk about driverless cars. If you all recall, there were so many articles written about how driverless cars are going to take over the roads. But after seeing the traffic in Hyderabad and India, we doubt that it's going to happen anytime soon. But one reason why, nowadays we don't hear that much about driverless cars is, I'm told, it's about accountability. Because if an accident happens, who is responsible, right? I mean, so Jawahar, any thoughts on how we can look into accountability of not just driverless cars, but AI algorithms? When AI gives the wrong answer, who is responsible?
Yeah, so this may be a way in which, for example, algorithmically things could evolve. Today, you don't have the right signatures in a synthetically generated content. So you have no legal way of verifying whether it is generated by algorithm or is it by human.
I can take one comment from the audience. Anyone? There is. Yes, please. Yeah, so clearly there are no good solutions right now available, but we can all see that that is going to be a huge challenge going forward. Okay, so let me move to the next topic and let me ask Shiva a question. So Shiva, you talked today about AI and materials, right? And in the US, NSF has a huge initiative on AI and materials. And then we are told, and you also told us, how it can accelerate discovery of materials. And we hear the same thing in drug discovery also, right? I mean, the pharmacy folks are also telling us AI can accelerate the discovery of drugs. Are there any similarities one can learn from the other, or there are very fundamental differences in both areas?
Absolutely. Actually, I think, drug discovery and, related protein fold, what we just heard sometime back, had tremendous success with AI-based methods. And there's a lot of learning for general material science in terms of pattern recognition and prediction, and starting all the way from composition to properties, right? But then pharmaceuticals, drug discovery are important but small subset of general material science. But in the context of general material science, there's still more fundamental scientific challenges in terms of the reductionism, understanding that better and capturing that with current AI algorithms. So I'm very excited with what's happening on drug discovery. A significant amount can be translated to material science. There's still a lot in terms of algorithmic development and application for us to get to that level of success in general material science.
Very interesting. Any one comment from the audience? Yes, please.
Good evening, sir. Actually, I have one question regarding that. You told me we can use AI in the material science also. So what if we are making a composite of two materials? So how can we identify the overall properties of that material which we are going to use in our device? Something, if we are making a device or any electrode, we can commit that this is showing, this will show us such kind of composition or properties. So what to do in that case? Because if we are using some kind of simulation software, so it won't be helpful that much for the property regarding.
Excellent question, and that brings in actually the limitations of current AI methods. For example, as you said, there's A and B materials well uncharacterized. But when you mix them A plus B, can we use any prediction scheme? Yes, if you start from first principles, because you have to reconstruct the entire interactions, right? But if you're just using properties of A, B, and somehow trying to predict, it just doesn't work that in material science, because A plus B is completely different from a phase diagram point of view, microstructure point of view, defect accumulation point of view. It has very little to do with A and B native materials. So that's an excellent question, where essentially what you just said from material science, we look at it like predicting phase diagrams of alloy structures and composites using AI. That's still challenging. That's one area of future growth.
Because that's the challenge I'm facing right now. I thought I should ask.
Thank you.
so
We all are
much.
facing that.
Model to data, right? Yeah. And I think something need to be added, because data driven, that data is also evolving with the level of experimentation that's happening. In 1900, what experimental tools we had, the data of trial and error. Today's experimentation is at a much higher level. So your data, that has to come in that somewhere, that we are advancing experimental observations to a very high level. And that will, of course, go into data review, which will also improve your prediction. So I think that otherwise it appears that the experiment is still at the bottom. Absolutely. We are spending most of the funds buying microscopes and all.
Okay, Shiva,
So quickly, point well taken, because the way we look at it, what you just said as the vantage point and the fidelity of experiments has been continuously improving. But then the more and more you resolve, you're actually observing different kinds of physics. So from a maths point of view, that essentially we say that it's about homogenization of the properties. There's still mathematical challenges and computational challenges. You rightly said, when I said experimentation, it's experimentation at what length and time scale, at what fidelity. There are lots of, bells and whistles experiment attached with when I say experimental data. Yes, like we had these 4 paradigms. At every scale, the experiment has to be well defined for each of these 4 paradigms. I agree.
All right, let's move to a different topic. And this question is both for Provost Weber and Dean Jawahar, because you have administrative roles. So first, maybe Jawahar, you can tell me, how are you addressing this issue of the need for these high-end GPUs in your institute? Because for today's deep learning and using LLMs and so on, there is a requirement for access to GPUs, which are not easy to come by. So what plans do you have for your students and faculty in your campus?
So if you ask me, how are you addressing? Answer is very simple, by complaining.
By complaining. By complaining.
Yeah, so that's the only thing that you can do today. With the type of compute required for solving some of these big computational tasks, training huge models, I think it is beyond the reach of academia today. But this also leads to a couple of interesting possibilities out of it. Sometimes one is is that the only way to drive the research? So there is a very strong question of what's the utility or what's the role of domain knowledge in such AI solutions. So I believe there are a large number of problems which require this domain knowledge, which is still unsolved and it is coming back. And such fundamental studies and the important things are possibly required now also. Possibly they are not getting the right limelight today. That should not stop us from not doing it.
Okay, Scott, so maybe the same question, but with slight modification. So, how are universities in the US going to address first this issue of access to this high-end infrastructure? And the second part to that question is, how should universities, evolve? Because most of this research is going to be interdisciplinary research. So do you go back to your older models of departments, and how do you facilitate interdisciplinary research, given the backdrop of AI? So the hardware question and the interdisciplinary part.
First of all, I just want to know, do you complain to the provost? Probably. This is really interesting. We're fortunate in New York State, as I shared with you earlier, to have this new program called Empire AI. And I recognize, obviously, even at its most fully implemented stage, it's going to pale in comparison to some of the government labs and some of the large IT corporations that we all know. But still, it's, I think, a great way for us as an institution and our other institutions across New York State to have access to, I think, an incredibly powerful computational test bed so that we can begin to test some of the ideas that we have. And, we've already started to collect ideas across our campus that will really not just speed up computation, but really will really, I think, require the new way of thinking about these research problems that I think generative AI has the potential to exercise. Now, when it comes to just, sort of interdisciplinary work, I have sort of probably slightly different views than many people on this. And I've actually directed the university in a way because of where I've made investments. So, when I am thinking about this, I've seen our university and I've seen many universities spend a lot of money building programs that start things but don't really have long-term sustainability. And it's because in the end, my feeling is great interdisciplinary work is foundationally built on strong disciplinary excellence, and then faculty who are not only interested but excited to work across boundaries. So you need both of those elements. One, you have to have your own deep domain knowledge and something you brought to the table, but then you have to be willing to work to others. Manu has a great analogy I'm going to use because I think it's kind of fun. Because there's also a little trick here at the end of this thought process. So if you think about faculty like really good fruit, they're great. They're fantastic. Each one of them, is fantastic on their own merits. But sometimes you need a little something more, so you make a fruit salad. And that fruit salad's pretty good because it's a combination of a lot of different things, but you can still see sort of all the individual fruit in that. And you kind of, sometimes even people pick out the fruit they like and leave the rest. But a smoothie blends it all together. And you actually can't discern maybe where the original contributions come from. Now that's truly, I think, the epitome of interdisciplinary work. The challenge for us as universities is we're kind of old-fashioned about how we evaluate faculty for promotion and tenure based on their kind of contributions to science and engineering and whatever the field is. And so we've got to work on some models that really help address the goal we have, which is this sort of blended, incredible opportunity to see incredible impact, but not necessarily always know exactly where that impact came from all the strong disciplinary excellence that went into it, while still recognizing that need and the need to think about people's real core discipline at promotion and tenure. Hope that helps.
It does help. So, if I may just elaborate a little bit on this point on Empire AI that Scott was just mentioning, is that once we have this governance investment fully developed in the next 2 years, at UB, we will be home to the biggest computing infrastructure when it comes to GPUs anywhere in the world in academia. And so that's going to be a great resource. And, so there have to be some shared models that have to be developed where, this is going to be shared with all the universities in New York State. So because not everybody can afford to have that kind of computing centers. And also it's a huge energy drain. So it's not practical also to have every university have its own computing center. But let me move to a different question, Shiva. And that is, you have also been involved with startup over here, I'm told. So if you can share, any perspective differences in the ecosystems in India as compared to the US, and maybe there is something to each can learn from the other.
That's been an interesting experience. I'm involved with a startup here into material science besides other research aspects based in Hyderabad. It's very interesting how, startups look at especially material problems, right? The central challenge is often, I realize that startups look at it like another software problem. Get the kids, train them in all, AI, ML, GPT methods, download the popular stacks, TensorFlow, other things, all the software stacks, and just apply them to the problems. So there is that rush of adopting generic frameworks to material science. So there's some success, don't take me wrong. So the success has been wonderful, that excites the startups to invest more money along that. But very quickly, I realized that they do run into the scientific challenges, and that's where there's a lack of training. So when I see the Indian startup community, I guess is what I've seen in US, the enthusiasm is very similar. They're working on really hard problems, but they run into limitations of appropriate training and to a certain higher degree infrastructure, what you have been saying, right? And here I'd like to quickly add, in US, the way we solve that for general extreme scale computing are these confederated clusters, NSF, DOE, they have this huge XSEED and other clusters which we have been using for decades, common resources for the whole country. As I understand, in India also the government has such resources, maybe to a lesser degree, but they're improving every day. So collaboration is the key. An example I want to point out with Jawahar Institute, IIIT Hyderabad, and something called T-Hub in Hyderabad, which is the incubation center in the city. They've been doing extremely good collaboration in terms of, mutually using infrastructure, exchanging ideas, and IIIT Hyderabad providing facilities for them. So it's been very motivating looking at the startup culture, but they still have to learn the best practices and get used to or get access to infrastructure. I think that's some of the challenges they're facing.
I can take one comment from yes, Paras.
I really enjoyed your talk in relation to, how AI can help materials discovery. So in academic, people like us who are experimentalists, is the better, boss? Thank you. There are two challenges that we face. One is an effective communication between the developer of AI and ML and the user, like us who are experimentalists. There isn't really still very effective communication, and I believe in Indian context it's even worse. The second one is that in many cases, we really, for one reason or another, we have a restrictive set of data. So we are dealing with, a small set of data that we can generate. Either the experiments are very difficult or they're very expensive. And in that case, if you reach across the aisle and say, could you do this? Oh, well, there's not enough data to actually train the machine and do something like this. So how do you, this panel, see to address those kind of challenges? Because I think that to make it more meaningful, in the social media, what Venu talked about, I think there is clear demonstration of its utility. But in academia, to help this bridge between these two challenges, how do you see this can be addressed?
I can take it quickly. No, what you raise is the central problem from material science perspective. If you remember, I indicated in my integration of process property performance, I said it's very difficult to get the microstructure captured for that exact reason that, for you to get an EBSD image or an XRD image experimentally, it takes hours to get, if not days, to get one single image. And if I have to use traditional AI methods, if I, let's say, require 1 million or a few thousands, that's near impossible, the amount of experimental work, the amount of metadata accumulation. So the lack of training, rigorous training data with the full set of metadata attached is actually lacking. And I'm aware of certain processes and databases being developed for materials. An example being, if you look up something called Material Commons, to answer that question, what it tries to do is it tries to tell experimentalists the templates of collecting data, curating data, and essentially, how do you spread that in a worldwide sort of community? There are certain initiatives because people are thinking about that exact challenge. And until Jawahar and Venu have been presenting these huge databases of handwriting and everything, right? We don't have such huge databases in general material science. For certain problems we do have. So yes, there are now paradigms to answer how do you communicate, how do you curate, how do you distribute. That's still very much evolving. But there's been a lot of work in the last 4-5 years. I can point you to some, platforms where people have been working on that.
Okay, let me move to Jawahar. So Jawahar, maybe if you can comment on some of the slides that I presented in my talk as to, are there areas, for example, in document analysis and recognition, OCR, areas where the problem is already solved, given, the success that we are seeing with some of these LLMs and other techniques? And what are your thoughts on the future of some of these areas of pattern recognition and document analysis?
I don't know whether you mentioned that the problems are solved. If you look at in your slides itself, for many situations, ChatGPT was not giving satisfactory answer.
Correct.
So this is a very interesting aspect, that what is the level of success required for different problems. OCR has been a problem. So I usually look at this as problem which have, say for example, low accuracy, medium accuracy, and high accuracy regime. So OCR has been traditionally in the high accuracy regime with lot of industry roles or industrial research happenings, products available, but many open problems still remain, and that is going to continue. So when you go to the high accuracy regime, so we are seeing today, like, you're happy with what ChatGPT is giving for non-critical use cases. When your accuracy definition become very tight, you start to see that there is a missing gap, and that is where that's why sometimes these problems are not as solved as we all anticipate. Particularly, like, I think I want to take attention to things like, say, Indian languages, where we are quite far from what you think as solved. So we have, say, 22 official languages and many more unofficial languages and dialects. We don't have data. Forget about solutions. Now, if you think, even if you make an assumption that just having that additional data, the OpenAI is going to solve all the problems, we don't even have the data. Where did the data come from? The data, if you think data came from internet, I'll just give a simple statistics. Around 20% of the world population speak Indian languages. But the percentage of Indian language content available on internet is only 0.1%. Which means the solutions that are built on top of this is going to be also low performing, which leaves lot of time to, lot of things to bridge at some stage. Now, is it all going to be bridged only with the data coming? No. If you look at also even the recent history, you see the algorithmic changes will also help in solving problem with lesser and lesser of data. Which means a country like ours, where if you want to build solutions for different regions, languages, dialects, sections, you need algorithmic advances, data, and their deployment is going to create a new set of issues, requirements for its adoptions in the Indian society. I think there are a lot of problems which are yet not settled.
I'm glad to hear that answer from you, because we still want to publish papers, Jawahar. So, okay, so now let me move to another aspect, maybe in conclusion. Oh, yes, sure. 5 minutes? Yeah. Okay, so just to conclude, maybe each panelist can speak to the following, which is, with AI advancing at such a rapid pace, do you believe universities are keeping up, or are we already falling behind? What would you say is the single biggest risk if we fail to adapt quickly enough to AI's potential and challenges across disciplines? So maybe first, Provost Weber.
Well, I'm not sure we're keeping up. And I think we're trying really hard. And I don't know what keeping up means, but I do think about it a lot, and I tried to share that in the talk I gave because it's accelerating so quickly. But I do think we have a responsibility that I also chatted with you earlier. Just the pace of change and employer demand in this area, I think, is so fast and so quick that I think need to respond, because I'm afraid if we don't respond, I guess I always try to think of sometimes what happens if you don't, then, what's our role? Is there another way that these employees will be spun up that bypasses higher education? And we don't have to like it, or we don't even have to agree that it's a good model, but generally if there's a need and we're not satisfying it, somebody's going to fill it. So to me, that's sort of one of the greatest risks. And there are many others, but given the hour, I'm going to let my other panelists jump in.
So, again, there are a lot of issues, but something, which is closer to my heart and what I see me and a lot of my colleagues complaining is how do graduate students look at this? For example, typical PhD would be 4, 5, 6 years working on a single problem. It's a well, laid out path, and, how do you go through this process? It takes a lot of patience. But what AI has showed, and all these developments over the last 5 years, 6 months, the whole paradigm changes. 2 years, everything is changed. And now graduate students are questioning themselves if they're doing very lethargic, slow research. The rest of the world is running, and they're trying to resolve some first principle, one governing equation for 6 years. So universities have to think about research timescales. How do they keep the students motivated? And for them to make sense out of this rapid development, but yet see the value and context of fundamental research. So we have to, there's some amount of communication to be done by universities, is my opinion on that topic.
I think universities have not lost the charm of the game. What happened is possibly the university researchers were hired by the industry. It's just it's a temporary local shift of their coordinate, not the education system. But I think one important thing that universities will have to realize and do at some stage soon is identify AI as something fundamental that need to be brought into the curriculum at the right level. Just like mathematics was brought into the curriculum across all disciplines long back, computing was brought into the curriculum sometime back, which many of us may remember the era where we started to learn Fortran. Why are we learning Fortran in the engineering curriculums? To today, I think there is a need for the students to be aware of AI in the right form, which possibly the subject has not matured into the textbook material to be adapted, but there is a need for adapting into the right curriculum at the right level across disciplines. It is not just for computer science, it's not just for engineering. It could be across all disciplines. Possibly this is becoming a very fundamental subject, just like mathematics and computing.
Okay, let me conclude over here with the following comment. Okay, I'll come to you. Okay, with the following comment that to your point about students, I have a student 2 years back. He picked a problem before ChatGPT came about. It was about charts understanding, and now whatever he's doing, ChatGPT can do already. So he needs to quickly reinvent the problem, and it's not easy. So there is that race. Also, Scott, to your point, that for academia, so the reason this is very important for academia is if you leave it only to the companies, the big tech, whether it's Meta or Microsoft or Google, they are finally ultimately only looking at the bottom line. So they are only going to pursue those projects which are going to make them money, right? So it is up to universities, academia, for all of us over here to look out for the public good. And therefore, which is why our governor invested $400 million so that we can have this computing infrastructure access where faculty can pursue problems for the sake of advancement of science, for the sake of public good. So there was a comment over there. I'll take that comment and then we'll conclude.
Respected sir, it was a really very good session. I wanted to ask that as you said, we are decreasing the gap between intelligence of humankind and AI, generative AI and all. So how are we maintaining the superiority that humans have today, and how are we maintaining that AI and other artificial intelligence are being within the control of humans and no dangers come back? And if dangers are there, what are the solutions that we have to maintain that?
Okay, so as you saw, I mean, we are just trying to probe this problem. So I can give you a simple example, right? If you use your phone, like an iPhone or something, you either have an autocorrect on or off, right? So either it keeps correcting everything and suddenly it's generating words which you don't mean at all, and it can be embarrassing sometimes, or it is going to leave all the spelling errors over there, right? It is not able to bring in the context and correction on, in a very flexible way, right? So whereas humans, you and I know exactly when to use context, when not to use, so we use our judgment, and, on a continuous spectrum. In order for the LLMs to be able to do this, right now, there is no easy way, because if you train the LLM once, right, it takes several months, by the way, to train, huge energy and everything. And so you have that model set. Okay, so now if you wanted to change it on a continuous basis, it's not going to be easy given the way the architecture is today. So humans are clearly, having something over here which is far superior in its flexibility and adaptation to what LLMs are able to do. Okay, so we can be rest assured that we are, machines are not going to catch up with human intelligence as yet.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, I think with that, since we have run out of time, let's thank all our panelists over here, and I will return this to Ashok. Ashok, I also brought for my panelists 3 gifts.
We have some. Now you can give the gifts. Unless we have 3 sets of gifts, that's different. But Venu, we asked the chair, Professor Venu, to give a memento on behalf of ICER to Scott. Yeah. On behalf of ICER, you are giving this. You are the chair. Next, we can give to Dr. Professor Jawahar. You should also have that, right? Two? Two for you?
Chair.
2 for you. So we can close this session, and I think vehicles are there, volunteers are there to take you to Mayfair. And for the students, bus is there to take you to, I think some of them are in ICER campus, some of them are in Berhampur University, right? And me and Paras have a job to do. We have to go and meet the Vice Chancellor to say thanks to her to give us the campus to ICER for the program. Thank you. Let me thank Anabik Pal for carrying out all this and the student volunteers for helping us in this session. Tomorrow is the inauguration, and we are getting the main person in the state of Odisha who is in charge of all developmental activities. And she is going to come. She is an IAS officer. She is number 2 in the whole state with the Chief Minister of the state. And she will be here. She was supposed to be here this evening, but there's some emergency meeting, and so she could not make it this evening. She'll come tomorrow morning, and she will be with us in the inaugural session. So please join us at 9 o'clock, those who are participating in ICFPM. Thank you.